Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Waring. I've been doing this for a long, long time. And normally I like to bring some salient quotes to the fore. But tonight I want to read a favorite poem of mine by Barbara Helfgott Hyatt. You probably know that she launched this whole community of which we are a part. And I dedicate and present these readings in her honor uh, every every time, except tonight. No, no, no. Even tonight, uh, she is well worth the accolades. And this is a poem that comes from one of my favorite of her books, with beautiful illustrations, like this one of my spirit animal. And this is called Northern Spotted Owl by Barbara Helfgott Hyatt. She sleeps all day, taunted by crows, mobbed by the tiniest sparrows, and holds to that branch, 8 talons tucked beneath her. She tempers her power, tamps threat into sexual fire, screams in courtship, mates on the knife edge, doesn't build but steals nests from treetops, from the gaping stump's heart. Her eggs are hard. Night unravels slights and ruses. Wood rats rustle the leaf litter, crush the skull, undercut the belly, swallow it whole. She is mind incarnate, cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, dark eyes that see too far. She's the fallen angel at the lip of the timberland. Her breast is as dapple as bark. Hurled from the story, she scatters the cold mechanisms of the mountain, the river's alluvium, the falls and its deception, the once and broken covenant of fur. Now, I did stumble over some of that Latin, which is part of her scholarly poetic license. But I love hurled from the story. We hear so much about the understory, but to hear about the story is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Well, it looks as though I'm now going to read some poems, uh, and I will introduce myself. I've run this poetry reading series since the early part of this century. My poems have appeared in the Boston Globe, New England Journal of Medicine, Radical America, JAMA, Comstock Review, American Journal of Nursing, Ekphraxic Review, Chest, Ars Medica, and Phonopoem, among other publications and anthologies. I briefly attended the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics at Naropa Institute, now university, where I studied the poetry of William Carlos Williams with Allen Ginsberg. From 1982 to 1988, I edited the now defunct Zone, a feminist journal for women and men. I've said, and I'll say it again, Barbara Helfgott Hyatt raised me from a couplet. I borrowed that phrase from Dorothy Parker, who I also love. My first book of poetry, What Love Tells Me, was published in 2016 by Word Poetry. A chapbook, Listening to Stones, came out in 1999 from Pudding House Publications. I live in Arlington, Massachusetts, among fruit flies. So I will begin with a poem about one of my favorite things. This poem is called Apple. An apple is perfect for a sedentary soul like mine. I'd need 100 tongues, 100 mouths to voice the canon. Northern spy, Roxbury russet, seek no further. Giants eat them to feel young. Goddesses compete for them. Dragons watch over them. I delay eating mine, too beautiful, brightened by the sun, varnished by the rain. Stowed in my pocket, a saunterer's apple for the road to the train. If it's to be my last meal, I want to bite into that red cheek, the snowy flesh of an apple. Well, I really love, and all my poems are about what I love. I mean, why not? Monarchs, I saw them where they hibernate in the winter in the Sierra Madre Mountains. Monarchs, they amass in numbers large enough to break boughs. They become flame rising on thermals, escape the deadly fields of winter to Star Island and Virginia Beach, then beyond to the balconed canyonlands, nectaring flowers of the highways. They get tattered, caught in rain, they're all but gone, their measure of magic dimmed, tremulous legions tamped down to a scant acres in Mexico. One tree cut for wood, and the whole colony is sacrificed to a killing draft. Climate brings the sunshot wings to food changed beyond recognition. This is how the monarchs vanish. Harbingers of souls returning, they struggle to resist the dead. They glide over the poles of the planet, guided by the crystals of magnetite in their brains, to their ancient breeding grounds. They cannot undo that map. Unspoiled habitat is what they seek at journey's end. Well, I have written a manuscript that has a lot to do about wars and other calamities, and unfortunately, it still has currency. And this is out of that book called All That Remains. Night writing. As a child, Louis Braille worked in his father's leather shop. His awl slipped and gouged his eye. It got infected, and then the other eye did too. He was in school for the blind when he learned a special code a captain in Napoleon's army invented so soldiers could communicate in the dark using only their fingers. He improved on this system, simplifying the series of raised dots into an everyday night writing using the same leather awl that had blinded him. France embraced this new language, and when Braille died, his body was buried in the Pantheon in Paris. But his hands, oh my teacher, they were laid to rest in his hometown. And a lot of people don't realize that when Robert Frost wrote The Road Less Traveled, he was poking fun at his best friend. Robert Frost in England for Edward Thomas, 1878 to 1917. I wrote a poem about two roads that diverged to poke fun at my friend's indecisiveness about the war. England could be ravaged, he scolded me angrily, knowing full well that Zeppelins flew over London, and what were we doing to stop them? A starling sang as he joined the artist's rifles to protect the life and landscapes around him, the birds that were his real countrymen. I stayed in the dark with my pen. We had planned to live side by side in America, farming and writing after he did his bit. Easter morning, that first day of the battle, he heard two hedge sparrows call to each other at his forward post on the Vimy Ridge. A shell took him then, the only brother I ever had, and turned him into a citizen of eternity. So vulnerable, that man, unmaimed, unblind. He was carrying in his sack my book of poems when he died. Fireflies. In the blacked out trenches, I gather fireflies in a jar, a dozen or more to read maps by. Seldom thanked for helping the war effort, they often die in those jars alongside the men. Horses, too, gone by the millions, choked from hunger or drowned in the mud. Our dog smelled the mustard gas and heard the wail of shells long before any of us. So I write by the chemical glow of these fireflies, back in thought to the fields of home. And we all know Ernest Hemingway was riding in a Red Cross vehicle and was gravely injured in the First World War. Ernest Hemingway. It's another persona poem. Everyone knew my mother dressed me as a girl until I was boy enough to notice. None of my characters are shell-shocked. They're broken by bravery. Writing is easy. All you have to do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed. I always had a truly sensitive capacity, but I was shy of myself and began to develop as a shield brutality. I drank, I smoked, I boxed, went to bullfights. Sometimes I mistook sensitivity for weakness, violence for power. I misused power for strength. In the end, little by little, me and my friends never saw one another again. Studio for Portrait Masks, Paris, 1917. For Anna Coleman Ladd, American sculptor and painter. Some say men without noses are very beautiful, like antique marbles. They wait outside my studio on park benches painted blue, a warning that the mutilated who sit here may be hard to look at. I take up the task where surgeons leave off, painting to hide what's missing, masks held on by glasses or string around the ears. If an eye is gone, I'll render its twin. You may not guess which one is true. Artfulness takes months, and I can paint only a few hundred for the thousands in the union of the facially wounded. My masks are galvanized copper, thin as a visiting card, worth their weight in gore. For lashes and brows, perhaps a mustache, I cut their hair, sliver foil in the manner of Greek statues. There are no mirrors here. Only the blind keep their spirits up. Where do I paint the melancholy? Some say I give them back their souls. A woman told her husband she no longer finds him hideous as she had a right to. They last a few short years, my thin soldiers, become battered, dog-eared. They're gone now. The men wanted to be buried with theirs on. And this may have some current relevancy, particularly in a place called Florida, when books were burned. In Berlin, in Bebelplatz, Eric Kastner stood by unseen as his own book was consumed. It rained so hard, the flames kept going out, and the fire marshals had to pour gasoline to keep it going. So long, Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Marx, and Walter Benjamin. Farewell, Einstein, Freud, and Kafka. Goodbye, farewell to arms. Silence, all quiet on the Western Front. James Joyce was consigned to flames alongside Helen Keller, plundered from private and public libraries, no longer allowed to tell their stories. We knew this was only prelude. And this was probably the hardest poem I ever had to write, but I just went to the Auschwitz Museum in Boston, and incidentally, Maura Healey was there as well with a small entourage, so I got to meet her. And there were just so many revelations. It was such an incredible exhibit of artifacts and video and just amazing insights. I learned that many were slaughtered, and the bill for the 30,000 bullets at Auschwitz was given to a Jewish organization for them to pay for the bullets that killed their brethren. Just unbelievable. Plus, you know, the train ride that they took to their deaths, they also had to pay ticket money. I mean, just unfathomable. I was beyond words. Confession. I led Jacob and Levi to the undressing room, told my cousin Sam where to stand in the chamber to die more quickly. Lord, forgive me. I fed my son my share of apples so he wouldn't die on an empty stomach. I was a machine, missing pieces. I cried without tears. I shut down parts of myself for these strangers, my kin. I knew what I was doing and could do nothing. They kept coming, so we stayed alive. I removed wedding bands, searched cavities, burned bodies. 20 minutes to reduce a world. First the hair flares, last the head, 2 blue flickers in the eye holes. The bones of my people swayed in the flames. I carried their ashes in a cart to the Sola River to flow downstream. No psalms, no graves. I slept in the heated bunks above the ovens. So on a slightly less somber note, Frankenstein, only slightly. While recovering from donating a kidney to my brother, I watched Frankenstein on TV, fascinated by a creature more scarred than me. Why am I here? He asks. What can I do? I wonder too how I am trying to breathe life back into my brother in his world of pain, how I don't want him to be pieced together from a cadaver, but rather flesh of my own flesh, how something the size of a fist makes marrow, the blood creating life from the catechism of grafts and stitches, a man rebirthing a man, my body conquering death. I'm now several years older than my older brother, and it's kind of feels weird, and I wish he was around. When I went through some recent medical difficulties and had to inject a blood thinner into my belly, he sort of counseled me, you know, this is just temporary. Imagine, you know, all those shots I had to take of insulin. So he's still somewhat of a presence in my life. What comes after? Before he died, My big brother took the family slides that used to circle through the Kodak carousel and made them digital. He needed to resurrect them from their old garb and give them new life. While we muscled furniture into moving vans, he devoted what little strength he had after 46,000 shots of insulin over a lifetime and the low glucose episodes that wrecked a few cars and a marriage. The kidney I gave him 20 years ago, slowly deprived of oxygen due to the effect of cyclosporin on capillaries. Some of us wanted him to pay more attention to the present, its coffee mugs to pack, but he was out in front, like when we went to the woods, always one step ahead, like now in his bedroom slippers after posting a picture of our father lifting one of us in the air, or mother on a beach at Cape Cod, we three boys gazing at the shell she's holding before putting it to our ears to hear a memory of sea, our bodies just beginning history that he brought back to us, like beach glass the ocean was finished with, a keepsake saved for us after the pounding and what comes after. One more for my brother. Elegy for my brother, with an epigram by Carol Hobbs. Thank you, Carol. Now that my brother's dates are finite, I marvel at your death, the way we used to revel in Rosedale woods, reckoning with rock and root, trusting the brook to lead us through the known world, you always going out in front like a magic trick. Between sky and the sturdy shoulders of the horizon, we salamandered our way to the mouth of the stream, possessed of nothing but the butterfly net we shared that mother made for us, with a broom handle, coat hanger, and cheesecloth. We plucked bloodsuckers from our legs, kept looking up, intent on spotting the double-tailed swallowtail we never did find, extending our lives into the sovereign day, needing no consolation, stone, tree, bird, angel, in light of what made us brothers. And a last little section. This is called Becoming a Poet. I am solitary, moon-driven, cultivating poems the way others grow gardens. Poems flow from my pen as if dictated. I am a song and a god. Sometimes I write poems on my shirt sleeves during walks, careful not to wash them until I've copied down what I've written there. I blame Jesus for jamming the conversation between me and God, the telephone of Christ into which everyone forever calls, hello? Who's there? To no one. As a child, I didn't believe in mirrors when they told me I have edges, am not unlimited, able to mix with my surroundings. I am like the anemone that opened so wide it could not close again, and so had to receive everything the night had to offer. What the poets tell me, always report from the trench of yourself. Turn an ordinary moment into a blessing. Write when you don't know the answer. Practice many, many years before using the word cerulean. Some poems are never finished, but like viruses, shed new poems. Yearn to live many lives, one for each longing. only use the word Leichenlicht once in a book. Let yourself take dictation from a rainstorm. Allow life to enter you like a splinter. Use the poem to pull it out. Well, I do have children, and they do sometimes appear in poems. Oh, here's one. Questions my son asks, answers I never gave him. How did the first thing come to life? Before sky was ever blue and the ocean waved, hope and fear conceived. Who are God's mother and father? As happy as stone as was with stone, the mouth of time had nothing to kiss, no mossy breast to feed. What if a bee is allergic to its own pollen? Earth has a place where it lets the infinite go by. It lifts a milky hand to the sun. If your brain has electric current, who pays the bill? The body has circuits without breakers. Mind is its own country. If a boa and a baboon become friends, can they speak to each other? They are each other's secret keepers, the two halves that make a heart. Earth Song. I am the hush when the crickets hesitate, the warmth that knows how to behave without starting a fire, a song that knows me better than sheet music, more instinctive than ink. Nothing on earth changes so completely as each night, a new robe each time. Only time matters, and sleep in woods far from home, alive to a heavy brand of youthfulness. I am a bird that keeps itself hidden, but sings, the one who meets his soulmate only to lose her to her soulmate, and so on. When I come to a fork in the road, I weep. The moon lingers only so long, a temporary remedy. Sorrow, said Emerson after his son died, makes children of us all. I am the albatross, never touching land for years, sleeping on the upturned sheets of wind, no one with more wings than me. And because it was asked of me, I'll read a few travel haiku, as touristy as that sounds. This is my last poem. Camino haiku. On the Camino, flowers are the daily bread for my pilgrim eyes. Arrested I am by fern fronds in the middle of a path of stones. Suddenly alone, my inner life looks less known than the moon's craters. I am the tortoise to everyone else's hare on the St. James Way. Today I word fast and dine only on silence. It is so tasty. Deep in revelry, a cricket's chirp lets me know I'm not all alone. I like up better than going back down, but flat best of all. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Lynn Pedersen, whose poems have appeared in the New England Review, Ecotone, Nimrod, and the Southern Poetry Review. She's the author of The Nomenclature of Small Things from Carnegie Mellon University Press and two chapbooks, Theories of Rain from Main Street Rag and Tekataluk, Adieu, from Finishing Line Press. Lynn first attended a workshop with Barbara Helfgott Hyatt in the 1990s, and it was Barbara who encouraged her to apply for a low residency MFA program. A graduate of the Vermont College of Fine Arts, Lynn lives in Atlanta. You can read more about her work on her website, www.lynnpedersen.com. Please welcome Lynn.
Thanks so much, Richard. What a powerful suite of poems you read, and I really appreciate the way that you interwove history and literature and your own personal family and wisdom into all of those poems. I hear an echo of Barbara's Spotted Owl poem in your Monarch piece as well.
Yes.
I feel like we're all sharing the same kind of lineage in a way,
Yes.
having attended her workshops, and I think the poems I'm going to read tonight will complement yours really well. So I'm reading a mix of older and newer work, and also some poems from the Nomenclature of Small Things. Many of the older poems feature science, history, and art, which is where I think they overlap a lot with yours. I'm still drawn to all of those topics, but I also focus a lot more in place now. I moved 10 times by the time I was 18. So those influences are showing up in my work. This first poem is more of an environmental themed work. It's called "This is Not an Elegy for the Colorado River." This is not an elegy for the Colorado River, which existed before and will exist after, though Homo sapiens will not allow it often to flow to the sea. But this is an apology to the barren delta, mud flat and species abandoned. Growing up in the high desert, I partook of the waters, so one could say the river is me, I carry it. And when I look in the mirror, Narcissus incarnate, running dry is not just supply and demand, it's the fallacy of keeping. See how the river, when you hold it cupped in your hand, slips through like time, it leaves and it leaves. This next poem is about a family tradition, and it's written as a prose poem. It's called Bratton Fruitcake. We follow the recipe exactly, the same hand-scrawled steps handed down in 1920 from a Mrs. Hanks in Crenshaw, Mississippi, on a folded, torn at the creases, dog-eared piece of paper with faint hints. Be forewarned about the mess when you add the liquids to the creamed butter and sugar. We labor through the instructions each generation has every mid-November. My great-grandmother, grandmother, aunt, mother, sister. Measure sugar, flour, buttermilk, molasses, and coffee. Then mix 4 eggs and enough candied cherries, nuts, raisins, citron, and figs to make a 7-pound concoction. We steam the pungent mass 5 hours, then cool and swaddle it in cheesecloth, seal it in tinfoil, leave it in a lard can in the attic for a month. This tradition held fast in Mississippi and thrived in Tennessee too, but this year, a new arrival, mold. We trim off and save what we can. Surmise it was colder years back, even that far south in the heart of the Delta. Winters with frost, sometimes snow. What do you do when it's too warm for the old ways to work? First, the teetotaler swapped out the recipe's alcohol for grape juice during Prohibition, and now the weather's shifted. We amend the directions, banish future cakes to the back of the fridge for 6 weeks to age. As my great-great-aunt Layla in Mississippi suspected, for years, the first frost had been occurring later and later each fall. So this is one of the moving poems. It's when I was in 4th grade, we moved from Kentucky to Colorado, which was a huge culture shock to go from the Eastern Forest to the Front Range of the Rockies.
Wow.
So this is also another prose poem. It's called After Moving, I Trained Myself to Call This Home. The key is to leave the new house as many times as possible in the first hours and days. Hitch a ride with a family member going to pick up bread or get gas, and each time pay attention to what stores are on each corner, where the school is, the library, the pharmacy, how you'd get there on foot or by bike, and never think back to the last city or compare the 1960s ranch to this 1970s split level, and which is dumpier, or consider how you've just gone from an unfenced half acre of Kentucky bluegrass with oaks and a homemade swing to a chain-link yard of scrabbly shrubs and grasshoppers and no climbing trees. From a street named for a president to one named for a Union soldier and railroad man, and how long it'll take for friends to contact you if they ever do. No, comparisons will disorient you and make you sick. So instead, focus on the snowy peaks of this state's license plate, count the number of chain restaurants, note how the Rockies are due west and always visible. So no matter where you are not lost as you try to memorize street names. Call out the correct left and right turns on the way back, and pulling into the driveway, you say over and over, this is. Now we're shifting a little bit into poems that are more about family or my kids and their traditional lineated lyrical poems. This one is called Glass Catfish. Two-chambered heart beating, transparent vertebrate hovering above the ghost shrimp and the shared tank. Spine wholly visible, no organs except near the head, the few parts pink and pewter. My son bathed in pet shop light, his reflection not much different at 16 than 3. We've done this fish business before. Only now I don't lift him to see the upper rows, don't do the water changes or the feedings. He speaks of bioload, inches of fish allowed per gallon, the stacked blue tanks like TVs and old store displays, all tuned to the same channel. Glass squid, glass octopus, glass frog. I marvel clear tissues, camouflage by invisibility, cells as conduit for light. Imagine if we were like that, mappable, like the transparencies I studied as a child in Better Homes and Gardens, Family Medical Guide. Stomach, heart, lungs, the inner workings laid out, as if the seeing through would make it easier to comprehend the body's dialect. Near the freshwater tanks, my son talks of compatible fish communities. I worry about his heart, size of 2 fists beating 35 million times a year, blood traveling 12,000 miles per day, taking 1 minute to make the round trip through his body. Worry about his breaking, mainly, or is it my heart? He bags his fish, and now I'm back at the pediatrician's office with its saltwater tank. My son's 3-day checkup, his life clocked in hours, and his carrier curled up new as a grub, sleeping. And a father in the waiting room with his 12-year-old son shakes his head when he looks at us and says, oh, he has so far to go. And this next poem is about a Foucault's pendulum, which I'm sure you've seen. I think the Boston Museum of Science has one, and a lot of Smithsonian has it. We have one in Georgia as well. So this is about my view of it as a child. Foucault's pendulum. As a child, I didn't believe it was the pendulum swinging in a fixed vertical plane, and Earth rotating on its bit of an axis beneath it. The pendulum knocking over pegs a staff member set up again and again in an unchangeable pattern like dominoes destined never to touch. Because we were, all of us, human and mechanism, roof and floor, affixed to the planet, all moving in tandem, weren't we? I stood on the perimeter of the circle as the pendulum neatly graced, kissed the floor, its metal bob reflecting a room full of doubters, I assumed, like me. I begged my parents to let me stay to see another peg fall. As a parent, I visit another museum and another city, and I stop and stand before this mechanism, knowing now that it is not the pendulum that makes its way around the circle, but we that make our way, watching long enough with my children for a peg or two to be taken down, the felled pegs, all of us pegs, the perpetual non-arrival of the pendulum, the one sure thing, no change, but the appearance of change. And this next poem is it's about the same son that was in the glass catfish, but this is when he was much, much younger, learning to ride a bicycle. It's called The Quick of Things. The day my 4-year-old learned to ride a bike, no training wheels, moving away from me for the first time on his own momentum, I felt this slipping forward, as if the minute hand on my watch skipped ahead, cheated the hour. So starts this pattern of lines like a geometry proof. I'm point A, and he's point B, moving away from, returning to. It doesn't take a fortune teller to predict his leaving. His too short pants, the bridge of his nose forming. Every day 5 new words collect at his feet. He'll disappear into the quick of things. Mosaic of backpacks at the school bus stop. A throng of brown-haired children. All the future days gather like worry behind a dam. It ends with me, a lone point on the circle, and I'll wait for him like I wait for the change of seasons, stake the garden, stack the dishes. For now, he traces circle after nested circle in the cul-de-sac, his feet sure on the pedals, this other world bearing down. And this next poem, I happen to have 2 apple poems just by chance. This first one is called Eve Paints the Apple Tree, and it has a line in it from Pavesse's Scrappa in September. Her problem, of course, is that she was never a child, and so hadn't the opportunity to know the tree as a sapling, to climb its branches, bark roughing her thighs, but only viewed it with the distance of an adult. Now it's a question of staying on task with the story, of suffering a great pain, to climb perhaps another tree and look back into Eden at the lost crown, to paint what she remembers later of that last day, the sky's blue witness, the leaves slick, glistening, and the snake. Had the snake not spoken? Was it her imagination, trick of the shadows? She must variegate the color of bark, siennas, umbers, ochres, reds, even green moss. Branches may break off during their lifespans, may be riddled with knots, regrets. Cover her right eye and look with the left, then reverse. Each eye sees color differently. How does she paint the temptation, every limb and leaf of before and after, the fulcrum where everything stops to ripen, regret, a tart yellow, black for secrets. Her children must know that the ochres and umbers, even now, conceal fruit that would fall at a touch. This next poem, if you're familiar with Wayne Thiebaud's work as a painter, he does all of the cake paintings and the fantastic desserts. I had a prompt that required using a painting for an ekphrastic poem, so I did one on his painting Candy Apples, and that's also the title of the poem. Forbidden, same as chewing ice or hard candy or crossing streets by myself. You'll crack your teeth. Yet every fall near Halloween, candy apples appeared in bakery cases like jewels, like bait, like Dorothy's ruby slippers. I convinced Dad to buy me one just once for a treat and wanted it so badly I didn't stop long to admire the slick as an ice rink coating, reflective as nail polish, new car paint, or a brittle Christmas ball. That little gathered sugar ledge at the base. So much can go wrong. The fruit can separate from the stick, stain your tongue. dye your clothes the color of mercurochrome. Dad held the apple for me, and the shell shattered when I bit into it, like eating shards of stained glass. The sweetness barely made up for the sharp edges on my gums, and my teeth grinding and sticking together. He finished what was left not to waste it. Didn't like it much. Candy bits cupped in his hand. And in the end, it was just the same old apple inside. So like disappointment, coated in shine.
Hmm.
This is not a travel poem, but it's a little bit related to one.
Uh-huh.
I bought a landscape print and later on realized it probably was generated by like AI because it's not signed by any artist and I can't really tell where it's from. So the poem is called It Occurs to Me the Landscape Print I Just Bought Might Be AI Generated. What you might see scenery-wise if you were heading east on I-70 toward the Kansas-Missouri border after passing through hours upon hours of monotonous grain fields. And now you've hit the cusp of the deciduous forest. These clustered trees, perhaps a sign of water, a nearby creek, and outside the frame, here comes a barn and cows. And as you drive on, suburbs and houses, the new yard's not even fenced yet. That's what I recall of my family's 14 trips traversing that highway. Not a series of clear reminiscences, but an amalgamation, Denver to Memphis. And this print, is it one artist's vision or a mix of many, a fantasy? AI's definition of landscape, no contrails or thunderstorms in the sky, no wind either, come to think of it, nondescript pastoral. Like my drawing instructor's advice not to recreate each leaf or be true to nature, but instead amend it, recreate the feel of leafiness, the idea of light hitting a tree's canopy. Does specificity or truth matter when memory is murky, all those trips merging into one? This may be no place. Still, I'm drawn to this scene, field with trees and hill, my old view out a car window as I tried to hold my gaze on one tree or a fraction of the landscape as the rest blurred by. Maybe the last two poems. I don't know if you remember, but Barbara always told me in workshop that if you write a poem about one child, you have to make sure that your other children have the same number of poems so that they're all equal. So
Yes.
the older sons, I think maybe one poem ahead, but I'm going to read a poem for the second son, so I can at least try to have them even tonight. So it's called The Second Son. He knows what water knows, his head passing through my body like runoff from a storm seeking least resistance. My muscles and ligaments go back to their earliest angles, back to the path of my first son who mapped the route. The second son follows as a bird, the inner landmarks of bone, ribs flexing like saplings, his legs seagrass under the movement of tides. He enters the world in phases, a shy moon, his skull an echo of my geography, his ears delicate teacups. He knows how to curl up, how to root, close his eyes against the fickleness of light. What is yet to be heard, what felt, voices that clap and peal like bells, not of hunger, fist clenched for the journey.
Nice.
And then this last one just kind of harkens back to my love of 19th century literature and language. It's called How to Speak 19th Century. Forget about the nomenclature of the moon, lunar impact craters, rills, your voice translated into fiber optics or beamed pinpoint to pinpoint on the planet. Here, all words are spoken to someone's face. Earth, seeds, thresher, plow, timbered. So unnerving, you say, having to look someone that long in the eye, just speaking your mind, or too involved in the first place, the 5-mile walk to your friend's house, your skirt catching on the field grass. You need to know not hydrogen, oxygen, H2O, but water. Where to find it, how to dig for it, how to keep a well from running dry. Not chlorophyll and photosynthesis. The word is harvest. The hard T, uncompromising as hunger. Sunup and sundown, light. Forget meteorology. You need to know bird migration, insect hatches, animal hibernation, what the falling leaves tell you. When the blossoms of the apple tree fall, plant corn. In short, the world is still whole to you. Each molecule, each syllable, each grain.
Wow, thank you so much. What the fallen leaves tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that we both had apple poems. There can never be enough apple poems or sun poems for that matter. SON.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we will turn our attention to the rest of us in the room. And I want to go first to someone who's coming up in our series later on. None other than Rick Reibstein.
Thank you. And thank you for all that we've just heard. That was really a lot of fun. And I feel like I should have prepared something more serious, but here it is for what it's worth. What cherries are for. The sides were drawn for the cherry war. The tree gave us our stores. One picked up a stone. It was thrown and barely missed me. The others saw what had been done. They turned upon the sinner and made him run. Called into dinner, we gloried in the day, but I sensed a price. Though now my hair is gray, I still wonder why cherries do not suffice.
That has biblical overtones. Very serious indeed. Thank you, Rick. Up next, Margie Flanders.
Oh, this has been a treat. I love the cherry poem, and there's such beauty and heart in both of the previous readers' poems. This is from a free write, of course, one of the many gifts that Barbara gave me. It's called Someone Else's COVID Poem. And the title is also the first line. Someone else's COVID poem would have a lawnmower under a mimosa tree, or an aquarium full of snakes or turtles, or a baby crying in the next room, or how they took up macrame or sourdough, even though there was a pandemic and nothing else would ever be the same. My great-grandfather, who died in 1926, might have written a poem that rhymed and used the word whilst more than once, never mentioning the word influenza or those who died of it. I want to mention those who died of COVID or suffer from long COVID. But really, I want to just write about the 3 nights I waited for the moon to clear of clouds, to reveal her fullness, The backlit bats dashed past finally, like omens challenging the dark, then revealing themselves. In this strange time, I am trying to write the duets I play with woods and sea, the spiders and crickets in our home, all the music I make with the universe all the time, almost by accident, to forget about all who died.
Hmm. Wow. Yes. The depth of years in that poem. Wow. Thank you. Up next, David Miller.
Oh, good evening. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Lynn. I've been thinking about, someone said, and maybe more than one person has said this, but that all poems are love poems. And I'm not entirely certain of that, but if that's true for the poem I'm about to read, it's true way, way down underneath the poem. It might still be true. Miasma. I wasted time and energy shooting eye rolls toward those fringe mongers. Troglodytes, I called them from my position safely out of range. I was still Victorian at heart and bite my tongue to realize this. My grandfather professed evolution in his textbook. I trusted in progress, even with dead ending branches, one step back phases. Progress, nevertheless, if microscopic, even if tracing the road ahead seemed like watching tree rings widen. Seems like I believed that smirking at dominators from just outside their frames could be the modest role I'd play in nudging their demise, even though the fabled revolution of my 1960s turned out to be, let's say, overextended. To be insulted by these fascists is so degrading, David Bowie sang. That was 1980. With the eruption of Falwell rupture, what felt like a great abandonment, though I could still make irony in performance art, numerology from Ronald Wilson Reagan's 3 names, his 666 letter count. I communicated this to my small audiences. Why rehearse the balance of that history? It's in many books that somehow still exist. Let's consider our persistent adoption of undead. This morning, at the exact instant my phone prompted me to begin another day, an assault rifle with bayonet appeared where my half-a-mind wake creates pictures. Safe behind barricades of political satire, we wag our fingers, warn of slippery slopes, imagine ourselves still standing upright. I breathe malice like microplastics, scentless, colorless, soundless, no taste or texture. A candidate's nicked ear is bloodier than an entire classroom. Thanks.
You had me at David Bowie. I love it. Thank you. And now please welcome Margot Wizansky.
Hi, that was lovely. The readers and the open micers so far. Margie Flanders, you are a really good reader. What does it matter? In our infinitesimal breath, in the whole of time, in the ongoing, if I still bother to snap off the geranium's dying leaves and prune and water, and they winter through to bloom again. If the scuttle of autumn fades golden to brown, winter strips its color, and spring lifts yellow-green heads. If the harvested rose in the proud field climb over the rise, lie fallow in strange beauty, and replenished by resting, grow another crop. If growth in the mutant swamp is neon green, unfamiliar, and the new plants settle and find their place. If what's sacred to me has no face or voice or name in a holy book, and for you, the sacred is the man and the book. In small ways, we go on. Still, jacked up rainstorms plunge villages into the ocean. Vast swaths of refugees move across barren deserts in search of a livable place. Crimes against children go unchecked, though we look in horror. Plastic garbage in the Pacific has grown 3 times the size of France. And I sit before you, grateful for the rest of you, exposed in our despair. Can anything save us except the old abstractions? Morality, courage, kindness, beauty, and love? Not save us exactly, just make more bearable whatever we have left.
Hmm. Very nice. Very nice. Wow. Up next, Deborah DeNicola.
Myself. Thank you so much for your poems tonight, both Richard and Lynn. Very rich stuff, and I every time I do show up, I meet more of Barbara's students that I didn't know before, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very new prose poem that I'm going to try out on you. It's called Millennium Jubilee. We were called to attend the fake alien invasion. The subpoena arrived in a blue vellum envelope with a stamp of clouds, an empty sky, and a watermark hologram of a dove. They gave the date and time, but Jim noticed the venue was missing. He said it was because we might be portal jumping and not know the cyberspace where we'd end up. I wanted to go as a cosmic diamond so as to flood the ballroom with my light. Amy wondered if the occasion was a prerequisite to the fake Jesus resurrection we'd prayed against, but we all agreed that would come later on, like after we slid our bodies into our alien outfits. I decided my auric field would be fuchsia with a tint of lavender or peach. Sandy was conjuring her acoustic vortex to slide right on down the sound of Tibetan bells into the stardust skin suit the tones produced. The day of, we costumed up early, went all theta-like under the dancing frequency of the singing bowls I psychoneurally sensed, and the orbs of change everywhere in the air, trees vibrating and grass waving its sheaths like clapping hands. I expected to see Whitman and Neruda, or at least Rimbaud in his drunken boat, and Wacko Jacko moonwalking on water. If they could fake aliens, why not singers and poets? And wouldn't that be the change we wanted to see in the world? After all, I'd practiced handwriting in raindrops ever since I was young, poems like drones buzzing my dreamscape. We knew we could metabolize the higher vibes, but wanted more than to live in a simulation. Nonetheless, to our surprise, a ship arrived on time, and Jim said something new was coming or going, while I felt in my clipped wings, something huge about to bubble up.
Fantastic. Wow. Something completely different. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
And you were our penultimate poet for the evening. I like to use big words. Our ultimate poet, Kathy Whitham.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. Thank you, poets all, and thank you for the opportunity to read. And wow, okay, I'm glad I picked this poem as the last then, because it has a hint of fall in it.
Nice.
And it's called Late Sun Reach. 1. A singular leaf among many tucked in shadow catches late sunreach, a slow, brilliant ember. My urge to see every moment of its fading grips my eyelids, unblinking until the last wink merges it with the shadows and the woods cool into darkness. 2. A singular leaf among many tucked in shadow catches late sunreach, a slow, brilliant ember among many tucked in shadow. My urge to see a slow, brilliant ember every moment of its fading. My urge to see grips my eyelids, every moment of its fading, unblinking until the last wink grips my eyelids, merges it with the shadows, unblinking until the last wink the woods curl, cool into darkness, merging with the shadows past late sunreach, the woods cool into darkness, a singular leaf.
Beautiful. Wow. Like a lullaby. Ah, a wonderful evening, everyone. Any comments you want to make before we disperse?
Thank you, everybody who read.
It's great
I
to
want
get the year started
I want
again.
to show, I want to show you that we have a guest. This is my oldest friend from childhood. And he was there when we had that little fight with the cherries.
Ah, well, I want to especially warmly welcome new people among us. Really great to see you, or the ones from long ago that are coming back. You're never too young or too old to be amongst poets and write poetry. You can even be in your 90s, like Stanley Kunitz, and come out with a full-fledged book. That's my plan now that my part has been fixed. And I hope your plan as well.
Yep.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. It was really
Sure.
fun to see people again and hear everyone's work, and
Yeah.